What's up guys, James Blonde here with MMORPG.com. This time taking a first look at yet another one of our most anticipated games of 2016, and that is Tree of Savior, developed and published globally now by IMC Games. Almost exactly 1 year ago, we were somewhat shocked to see that IMC Games actually put a Steam page up to get the game greenlit. We honestly thought it might have been a mistake or, a leak for something that was going to happen way later on. Needless to say, it was greenlit by the next day. Now, if you don't know for some reason, Tree of Savior is a Korean-style fantasy MMORPG with very intriguing visuals and music, that's for sure, with an old-school isometric feel created by Kim Ha-kyu, which is the original creator of Ragnorok Online. So the game is essentially the spiritual successor to Ragnorok Online and has a lot of the same elements. So the game just recently transitioned to its free-to-play launch date on May 10th, which didn't happen so smoothly, unfortunately. It already has a lot of mixed reviews on Steam based on server problems, game optimization, gold sellers taking over, and several other issues, which I'll set aside, but seeing that it is in its launch state here in the West, I'll spend a little bit of time going over what the game has to offer. Okay, so when you first hop into the game, you can choose from 4 base class options here. It looks like a lot more, but these are actually just the male and female versions of the same class. But with that said, once you've selected a class here, it definitely doesn't stop at that point. Once you've reached a high enough class level, you actually get to unlock your other classes based on that class and sort of branch out into plenty of different classes, which get you additional skills to add to your existing class, and then that process repeats as you progress towards the game's level cap, which is like currently 280 and is supposed to get to beyond 400, I think. So yeah, there are a ton of different classes you can ultimately choose from. There might be 4 base classes right here, but as you play, you actually have access to about 80 or so playable classes currently, and plenty more options as they get added into the game later on. So with the base classes, you've got the Archer, the Cleric, the Wizard, and the Swordsman, which is actually the one I chose. Male or female, like I said, and once you decide, you have some, but very little customization to your character at this point. You can change your hairstyle and select your starting city, and that's actually about it for now. So when you change classes, you can actually pick up a quest that provide you with a different costume for your new class, so there's something there in terms of cosmetics. Plus there's special cosmetic items and advanced hairstyles in the cash shop, which I'll show off later. Knowing that you'll want to make several characters, you do pick a family name, or a team name in this case, so you're going to have a different one per server if you decide to change servers, but this is essentially your last name. You give your individual characters a name from there, and you can kind of make that work. And seeing that there will be so many different class options you can choose from, you can also expect to have some fun and unique playstyles focused around the combat. So the combat in the game is actually quite fun, and that's once you figured out what control scheme you want to work with. By default, it's set to automatic, which is fine and all, but it kind of depends on what class you start with. I started out and mained as a male swordsman, like I mentioned, and the first control scheme, which is primarily keyboard, works with the arrow keys and your abilities on A through semicolon, with jump and basic attack on Z and X. So it's kind of like the way Dungeon Fighter Online is set up, as the closest example. For a class like the Wizard or the Cleric, or maybe even the Archer, I haven't really tried the Archer, you're probably going to want to switch to the keyboard and mouse setup, labeled by mouse in the options. And this is going to give you the traditional MMORPG controls where you move with W, A, S, and D, and all of your abilities are on the number keys, as well as the convenience of selecting a target and casting abilities with the mouse. If you leave the control style settings on automatic and try to play as the Cleric or Wizard, you're definitely going to be in for a bad time. It defaults to the keyboard-only controls, which I mentioned work fine for the Swordsman, and you'd think it would default for the mouse and keyboard controls, especially if you pick the Wizard or Cleric. Something simple that they could really easily change, and hopefully they do. The other cool control scheme that works is the gamepad. For the Swordsman, that is. Still not very fun with the Wizard, that's for sure. But the controls for the gamepad are set up so intuitive that I actually prefer using it over any of the other options for the Swordsman, just because it makes it feel more of an arcade-style game, kind of like, let's see, Golden Axe, I guess, from the Sega Genesis. The only cool part about automatic control selection is that it can easily switch from one control style to the next, just by activating controls within that style, like so. The combat itself, like I started to say earlier, is very fun. The skills, no matter what class, feel extra powerful, especially when taking out groups of enemies at a time. You can tab target to have enemies selected, and if you're playing as a ranged class, it will actually target what you have selected specifically, but you can also use your abilities freely no matter what class you're playing. Now, I can't speak for any other classes besides the Wizard and the Swordsman, but the Swordsman has a sprint when double tapping a direction that looks like this, whereas the Wizard, for some reason, does not. He's stuck at moving normal speed. Not really sure why that mechanic is bound to the Swordsman, and it makes me wonder if I'm sort of missing out on a Wizard-specific movement ability that I'm just not seeing. The game sure didn't tell me about it. I suppose it could be the fact that the Wizard doesn't really seem to lose stamina, whereas if you're playing as a Swordsman, in combat and while running around, you burn through a stamina bar and have to either rest to regain stamina over time. This will also restore your health and mana, especially quick if you're next to a campfire. Take a special consumable that restores a portion of it for a little while you're on the go, or by breaking these things that show up around you somewhat frequently that restore all of your stamina. So it's got this system, but it's well managed and not really anything that's going to hold you back. But overall, the combat is arcadey feeling, kind of like a toned down Dungeon Fighter Online, in my opinion. Now the cool part is the boss fights are frequent. Sometimes you run into several mini-bosses while trying to complete a single multi-part quest. Now the boss mechanics aren't really all that special, but you do have to make sure that you kite them around and stay out of their AoEs and telegraphs and whatnot. And jumping can be important too, especially since the AoE attacks get really large. They can actually be avoided with the right timing. Luckily, the Swordsman has abilities that buff up both his attack and defense to help him stay in the fight and end it a little quicker. But then again, damage is not something that any class is really short on. I can imagine doing this in a group is a bit more fun, but I still look forward to the next boss encounter. Plus, fighting this boss alone is more rewarding. If you group together, you lose the XP gained individually. That can make it a little hard for random people wanting to join a group, seeing that everybody's XP will be reduced. The questing in the game is pretty standard, lots of walking around the very huge game world, killing cute and innocent creatures that really remind you of Pokemon most of the time. It's neat how you interact with the NPCs a lot of the times. You'll pick up a quest, and as you walk away, they'll actually shout out to you, "Oh, hey, by the way, don't forget this or that," or whatever it may be. Not really sure why I thought that was cool. I guess it's just slightly more interactive, especially since I wasn't expecting it. It's not something that happens all the time in MMORPGs. All of the systems are well done in the game, in my opinion, at least so far. But one of the best things in the world is the fact that once you've completed a quest, you can actually press backspace on your keyboard to instantly teleport to the NPC that you turn the quest into. That's even better than being able to turn in quests remotely, because most of the time it teleports you closer to where you need to go next. And if that's not the case, you've also got a teleportation item that will send you back to the entrance of the area that you're at, which can save you some time that way too. These are just a few of the quality of life features. Like I mentioned earlier, you regenerate stamina, energy, and health while you're resting, but you can also craft items, enhance gems, and other stuff while resting as well. So you don't actually have to go to a crafting station or anything like that in order to get the job done. But you do, however, have to find the right class-based NPCs or class masters in order to learn attributes, but I'll get into that in a bit. Of course, if you know Ragnorok Online, you can probably guess the grind is real. With that high of a level cap, making it to level 50 is kind of like making it to level 5 in other games. Big freaking whoop. You're still going through the intro tutorial basically at that point. So the game is simple, it's very easy to get into, but that simplicity turns straight into complexity once you leave the nest, so to speak, and get into your other class types. The game world is absolutely huge, I think I've already said that, and the questing has you exploring pretty much all of it. So much so that you'll find yourself in areas that are considerably more challenging in terms of mobs and bosses without ever realizing that you have EXP cards to spend. Some of the quests actually give you these EXP cards, and they come in different strengths as you get further into the game. And so besides just gaining experience out and about doing what you're doing, killing monsters, this gives you chunks of experience at a time to both your character level and class level. As you level up your character, you can put stat points into your character attributes. Pretty standard MMORPG formula here, also very intuitive, and as you level up your class, you can put points into class skills, up until it's time to advance to a new class, that is, and then that leveling system starts over. So at class level 15, you can make your first advancement, and as a swordsman, I could choose the second circle swordsman, which would give me more abilities like the ones that I had been using, but it would also give me access to special attributes that I couldn't get any other way, and I'll show you those in a second. The Highlander, which switches over to using a two-handed sword, better for using the spin attacks, more powerful AoE attacks, and stuff like that, or the Peltasta, I think that's how you say it, a more guardian-like role focused on defense and incorporating a shield. So I ended up going with a Highlander just because, you know, it's so hot right now, and it was more or less what I wanted to change over to in my class, and I realized that once you select one of these classes, it's kind of like a layer that goes over your existing class. You just sort of inherit new abilities in the direction that you want to go, which is cool and all, but at the same time, if they didn't do it that way and they made it so that way you could choose more classes right from the start or at, say, a certain level with more abilities and make these advancements happen later on in the game, I don't know that it would be any different, if not better, that way. Because if I choose one of these, then I'm going to have to make and grind through another character, completely different one, in order to explore abilities that might be in another advancement path. Each one of these branches off into 3 more options, so that's 9 different classes total right there from these 3 choices alone. And each one does that as well, I suppose. Bottom line is, it's a cool concept, but I don't really see everyone liking it. There's only so much replay value that can get you. The other part of this is the learnable attributes that I started to mention earlier. These you learn with silver that you accumulate quickly, or even quicker if you decide to purposely fall victim to any of the thousands of gold sellers that plague the game and consume the entire chat. More on that later. But these attributes add a little bit more to your existing skills by increasing damage, applying a bleed or a knockdown, and increasing the maximum amount of buffs you can have, as an example. Besides the silver to pay for them, they also have requirements such as class level, specific advancements, like this here requires the 2nd Circle Swordsman, that I am not. I'm the Highlander, so this one is no longer available to me at this point unless I decide to make a new character. That's kind of what I was referring to earlier when I said it might be better if the classes were all available at once after X amount of levels, I guess. And then some of them you can learn immediately while others take time to learn. You do have to learn these attributes from your class master, and early on, they're probably the best thing you can spend your silver on, because I've never really needed to buy gear or consumables whatsoever. Well, that's early game anyway. Later that might be a little different story. While leveling, there really wasn't much in terms of variety when it comes to gear. I mean, you'll find a specific gear set and weapon that you like and stick with that for 20 levels or so before switching to something better or upgrading it. Like I said, no class lacks damage, so you're already powerful enough to begin with. So with so many levels, I can see that one set of gear is good enough to last you for a while, but it would also be nice to be able to look forward to finding new loot and sets of gear, at least every once in a while. So whenever you select a new advancement, you're given a quest to find your new class master NPC, and from there you'll earn a new costume, but this is also something you can find in the cash shop. Not the class-specific costume, that is, but costumes in general you can purchase. If you can see what you're purchasing, that is. The gold seller spam is a real pain. So yeah, the cash shop consists of costumes and hairstyles, making the majority of the character customization in the game behind a paywall. Not really sure if that's a big deal to most, but it probably is to some. Of course, we've got very standard consumables available to you as well, and in the premium section, we've got a token that gives you premium status, essentially, giving you the ability to learn attributes instantly, increase your movement by 3%, 30% increase to EXP from hunting monsters, stuff like that. You've got an XP tome here, which is essentially just part of that same token, giving you the bump in the monster EXP rate and a faster stamina recovery rate. Not a whole lot in the cash shop, as you can tell here, other than the costumes and hairstyles and, of course, the text bubbles selling silver. It would be cool to be able to pay to not see that. Overall, guys, the game is fun. It's an adventure for sure. The visuals are really nice to look at no matter where you end up, even though when stuff starts happening, you can expect drop frames really bad, even with a GTX 980. I guess that's a good excuse to buy the new 1080 in order to have a smooth frame rate in Tree of Savior. Oh, and most of the time the music makes you want to fist bump while you're playing, which is kind of hard to do because you need both hands, or at least do the Night at the Roxbury head bob. Unfortunately, it comes down to IMC Games having a really rough launch. A lot of the issues have been fixed and at least addressed, but even that hasn't gone so well. As an example, in order to attack all the gold sellers, they made it so that players can't trade silver directly, and they've got to do it through the market, which has its problems. And you have to wait a specific time frame in order to approve the transaction so that the developers can try and catch specific and suspicious transactions. This is just one of several examples where most of the time systems meant to steer away bots actually cause issues for the players who are not breaking any rules. Anyway, guys, all in all, I did enjoy my time in Tree of Savior because it is unique, and I think people will love playing this game, honestly. And personally, I feel that the problems that are there currently aren't specifically bad enough to keep people from playing it, and that will definitely heal and get better over time. If you're up for the grind, this game is pretty legit. I didn't even really scratch the surface for what the game has to offer in terms of content, PvP, guilds, dungeons, and stuff like that. So if you want to learn even more about the game, check out our beta preview and launch review for Tree of Savior, linked in the description below, or just head over to the game profile at MMOHuts.com. But until next time, guys, that's going to be it for me. I'm James Blonde. See you out there, gamers.